Welcome to another live streams. Our time to get together and talk about gangstalking, plausible deniability. Excuse me. Clear my throat a little bit. I tried gargling before I come on, and sometimes it helps. But when you got the day off and you're sitting around, it's not like I'm sitting around talking to myself. So I may have to clear my throat a little bit. In fact, I wonder if I can block the mic. Some people, they've been sensitized to that. There's different things, little quirky things that, you wouldn't think anything of it. But it's like that neural linguistic programming, that sensitization that people deal with. And, it's a trigger. So I'll try not to play that game a little bit. In fact, I'll try to get it over with right now. Hopefully, sorry. Hopefully that's not going to be a factor. But anyway, I like to get out and do these on the weekends. I know that targeted individuals are experiencing a lot of deprivation. It happens to all targeted individuals. They are boxed in. Not only are they dealing with things that leave them, wondering what exactly is going on. It's just a type of tyranny that puts them in a place where, there's really no, stimuli that is healthy. Okay, so, the whole situation that target individuals deal with, they are either surrounded by negative stimuli or no stimuli, right? It's either bad things or nothing. It's not a good place to be. And I've talked about the fact that, if you're experiencing that kind of tyranny, you want to try and use it for something productive. Okay, so if you're dealing with the isolation or whatever, a good way to deal with that or with the frustration is to put it into something that's productive. Okay, you may begin to study or better your education, or you start working out or whatever, and you channel it and try to use it rather than to let it degrade you and take you into a place where they are breaking you down, because gangstalking is basically a way to box somebody in. It starts out with different things that the target may think are strange, right? You might be getting a different attitude from the people around you. You might be getting little hints. You might be playing little games that seem suspicious. You don't really think anything of it, but you're noticing it. Okay, and you're going to be surrounded by that. And that's really the beginning of that sensitization process, because targets are led into a place eventually where they're dealing with gaslighting, and if nothing else, they can't get the target to question themselves or think they're crazy. They want everybody around the target to believe that they're mentally ill. Okay, and I've talked about what's the end game, what's going on. There's a lot of things going on. Okay. And there's a lot of ways that gangstalking manifests, and there's little games that are going on. They're not all the same. Okay, targets might be involved in some type of little program where they're being experimented on, or maybe there's some type of fraternity, or a type of social dynamic in their community to where they have been selected as a scapegoat. Right. And so they're like the vessel of wrath. Okay. And then there's always the demonic puppet masters behind all this stuff. But there's a lot of things that are going on. Maybe people are just, kind of getting off on controlling you or whatever. And that's all they know. They don't know anything else. They're not being contacted, by the CIA or by some type of government thing, or by, the Freemasons or whatever. But they're just having fun controlling you. Really, they're being, led into that demonically, but they don't know. They have no idea. And I've talked about that before, that people can be involved in your harassment without intimate knowledge of anything really going on in your life. Okay, there's different forms of involvement. There's different ways that the puppet masters compartmentalize the perps, right? Some of them know a lot, and other people don't. And you probably ran into people like that before, where it's like, what? They're very distracted people. I've talked about that before. Society is getting, I don't know, it's not getting any smarter, and people are distracted very easily. Something will be important, it'll be in the news, everybody will be talking about it. 2 days later, everybody forgets. A week later, it's completely gone. And the attention span of everyone hooked up to their phones and their devices, and all the fluoride and everything that's out there in the environment. And the fact that they're busy and just trying to keep up, with the bills and everything. It's people can be distracted and easily manipulated and deterred and so on and so forth. And the indoctrination that's out there is really, really, really bad. So, by the time we got to Gen Z, things are pretty bad. But people can be involved just through those social dynamics. Okay. So, when the target is, starts to see this stuff around them, it's not always really obvious. In fact, it's sometimes it can be that way for years or even decades. There's a lot of targets that'll say they can go back and think of things that were almost like foreplay or foreshadow in their experience, in the sense that they were getting that directed conversation maybe even decades before the overstalking began. All right. And that process of neuro-linguistic programming or sensitization was really started a long time before that they started to experience this stuff. You can see the demonic roots involved in this kind of harassment. You can see the game that is played eventually. When you step back, if you've been a target dealing with this stuff for a long time, you step back and look at what's really happening after you've had a chance to feel out all the disinformation, to absorb the harassment and the comments, and see the strategies, and see that these people really aren't all that, and all these little games and some of the threats that never come true, and you can tell they're just trying to freak you out, even though it's involved in some pretty interesting stuff, in the sense that you have people who seem to know things that they shouldn't know, right? So at first, when the target's dealing with that, it's tempting to come to different conclusions. It's also very tempting to believe that these people know more than they know. Okay, so the target is always surrounded by that strange dynamic that here and there, like I said, maybe even before they experience the overt stalking and harassment, they'll have things that make them kind of go, I wonder if, no, that couldn't be what I thought it was, right? That's not possible. How would somebody know what I was thinking? Or how would somebody know that I did that? I was out in the middle of the country, or I was all alone, or I was in a room without windows, or whatever. Nobody knew about that. How did this person know? Well, it's probably just coincidence. I don't know, whatever. And they will have those little things, and incrementally, all that stuff will build up. And the thing about it is, when you look at the logistics of harassment, even in a type of conscious collusion involving real-time dynamics, where you have people organized in a conspiracy against someone, and it just takes minimal resources. But when you deal with the heavy logistics that a lot of targets are dealing with, that's when you start getting into things that just do not sound realistic. Okay. And unfortunately, with the disinformation and the fact that the scientific methodology around gangstalking gets people to process information in a personal way, right? All these things are going to be tailored towards that type of reprogramming. So the target's inevitably going to read into things, right? You're going to be paranoid. You're going to have issues, trusting people or figuring out what's gang stalking and what isn't, because that's how it's designed. That's the whole reason they use the sensitization. That's why the directed conversations are employed. That's why you have all these subtle techniques, like people moving things around in your house or tampering with your personal property, sneaking in and switching something around in your house or cutting little tiny holes in your clothing or whatever, right? Because it doesn't, first of all, it doesn't make sense. Second of all, when the victim starts to put all these little incremental pieces together, it just sounds nuts, right? It feeds into the DSM or that criteria to diagnose someone with some type of persecutory delusion, and the whole goal behind it doesn't seem to make sense either. And when a target gets all this stuff and starts to see the hierarchy that's out there, they usually don't process that information correctly either. Because now the Freemasons are all chasing them down, and the Illuminati has targeted them, and the government is coming after them. But they move through their experience, and somehow, some way, they just happen to outsmart them at the last second every time they try to come after them. And they swear these people are trying to kill them. They swear that they are after them, and all these things are happening, but somehow they still survive, right? And what's the problem? Well, they're missing the point, right? And the plausible deniability that is involved in these techniques that they are surrounded by, the sensitization, the neurolinguistic programming, right? The directed conversations, the little games, and all the incorporated stimuli and behaviors that surround the target, where they can be attacked in broad daylight in a group of people, and they're the only ones that see it, or they start reading into things because of the harassment. Is that it is designed to make you look crazy and to convince you, if possible, that you're losing your mind, or to get you into a psychosis, and get you to believe something that's not true. And I talked about that. I think it was in the last live stream, that there's criteria that have to be done as far as that spiritual explanation when you get into the heavy stuff that targets are dealing with. And it's like, well, why would these people do all this stuff? Why would, a lot of targets will get into that. How much money are they spending on this? I mean, you got to be kidding me. They harassed me over at the grocery store, and now these things are happening. And I go to the the river for a walk, and these people are coming out of nowhere, and it's just that there must be agents everywhere. What are they? Were they bringing them in from another? And it's not like that, though. It can happen that way, but it's not always like that. And the conclusions and the syllogistic reasoning that is used to process the information feeds into it. Right? It does. And that's where a lot of the plausible deniability comes into play, because it's something that surrounds the target. There doesn't seem to be a logical motive. It doesn't seem to be realistic, the number of individuals that they are dealing with this interstellar conspiracy, where they take off and go to the other side of the United States, or leave the country, or whatever, or they run around and live in hotels, but they're being chased down by this cabal of people with a huge amount of resources that seem to be hacking all their devices and chasing them down and shooting them with weapons, and importing voices into their mind and all this stuff. And why? Well, they're trying to create the beast system or something, and people come up with all these reasons, but it's the landscape that you really have to focus on. It is the menagerie, or the bigger picture that you have to keep in mind, right? And some targets they're being experimented on. Some of that stuff is out there that people are looking for ways to silence whistleblowers, or coerce people, or use different vessels of wrath to scare the hell out of people, or ways to control people, and they're working on all that stuff. But the obfuscation, that's really out there about who you are, where you came from, and where you're going, it'll always play into this. Okay. And like I said, even if you're dealing with something that's government based, even if you're just dealing, you know, you know, with people who just want to control or feed on you with this type of group harassment, it's evil. It's evil. And you know, I've mentioned that the people involved in this, they're really the people that are going to get it, right? They're being condemned. They're piling all this stuff on their plate, and it's all for later. There's no rush. There's no rush. And I've mentioned the fact that, you know, I mean, you have to believe the word of God. You have to believe the truth, and you have to know uh, that this whole thing centers around the criteria of faith and truth, right? The kingdom of darkness, right? You know, the truth versus the lie, so on and so forth. And you know, it's not just the harassment that's being obfuscated, right? I mean, it looks like all these people are just getting away with this stuff. It looks like they're just, you know, moving through life, and you're the one that loses, and nothing is fair, and it challenges everything that is right, everything that is true. It has risen itself up against the very standard of righteousness and all that is good, because these people, they should be locked up. They should be sitting in jail right now. Every single person that's listening to this, that's experienced gang stalking, these individuals who are doing this to you, they should be locked up. And some of them should be charged with attempted murder. Okay, we talked about that in the last live stream, but for some reason it's not happening. For some reason, the majority of the population either doesn't care or is in on it. And that reality flip that the targeted individual is experiencing exposes what's really there. You know, it's the ultimate red pill scenario. There's no going back. You've been to the sausage factory, and it's you're here. It's too bad. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you, but this is reality. You know, it's like Neo on the Matrix, right? He sees what's going on now, right? Everything else was an illusion, right? All these things that people are chasing after, you know, the idea that the government is out there and they want to protect you, and you know, things are just basically good, and people are just basically good, and you know, you can choose whatever religion you want, and you know, look at those cute Buddhists over there, and oh, I like the Christian cathedrals, and let's get the Christmas tree and decorate it, and it's Easter, let's color some eggs, but really it's way beyond that. And when you see what's really happening, and you as a target individual start to dig in to, you know, who's really in control, what's really going on out there, what's up with this 9/11 thing, what's going on with the Mandalay Bay shooting, what are all these things people are talking about, conspiracies and the different bloodlines, and these secret societies with rituals and all this stuff, and this deep state new world order thing, and what is all this stuff anyway? And you look at it and you see that there's more than a kernel of truth to these things. You see that it goes very, very deep, and you're right there at the heart of it. And you know, like I said earlier, some of the people know a lot, and you run into some of these individuals out there. They've got that snicker, they've got that look on their face, and you know, there's really no other explanation. Once the target realizes that they're being hunted down, once they start to experience this stuff, well, you know, I mean, it's off the chain, right? Like I said, it might start slow, it might be subtle, it might even play out for years, right? And I've had that happen to me. People, well, this is for later, when we finally decide to drive you crazy. I said, what? So you all right? You feeling okay? Well, later you're going to be, and they're mumbling and walking away. I can't wait. And you're like, gosh, what's wrong with that person? I mean, it's almost like these people are on something. I really wondered that. When I started to, you know, get the overt harassment, I thought, everybody's losing it, man. You know, why is everybody so weird? What are they talking about? Why are they mumbling? What are all these things that they're talking about? What are they saying this stuff for, you know? And then, you know, you start dealing with the personal information, and you're like, whoa, man, this something's up now, right? And then you're tempted to, to think it's just a little game that you're playing or whatever. But the suggestions, all these things that are in your face, the fact that targets will talk about, living in an apartment complex, and it seems like people are watching them, and somehow they know which room they're in. They will crawl across the floor at night in the dark to see what's going on because they hear something, or they'll try to go in a different room because the people will start banging on the wall as they try to go to sleep, and so they'll sneak around. But somehow, some way, they know what's going on. They know what you're thinking. They know when you fall asleep, even though you're just laying there and you're pretending like you're asleep or whatever, and you got your camera on, you're trying to catch them pounding on the walls or screaming through the vents, and nothing happens. But as soon as you do fall asleep, it starts. How in the hell do they know? How does all this stuff work? The guy goes out of his house, and immediately the neighbor that he suspects is in on it or something is there smiling, looking, smoking a cigarette every time the guy walks out of his house, or every time the girl comes home from work. All of a sudden, that strange vehicle will pull up and park in the space that is yours, and you're like, well, how did I got off work early today? How would they have known? And all these coincidences are surrounding the target, and there's nothing you can say though. The plausible deniability is there, and is designed in a way that if you say anything, it plays into the strategy. If you start to try to explain this stuff or to confront people, it has a very negative effect, and a lot of targets will find that out the wrong way. I was listening to a video today where a guy made complaints against someone, and he was literally hearing these people yell at him and so on and so forth. Had come to the conclusion that they were being paid by the government, to harass and stalk this guy, and just basically drive him nuts. And they threatened to take him down to the hospital, of course, because you don't have evidence of that. I mean, I'm assuming the guy was telling the truth. The problem when you confront someone is you have to deal with that plausible deniability. You don't have hard evidence that anybody is harassing you. It's so scientific that it's just there's no getting out of the fact that the target is going to be boxed in by it. It's like the Lutheran Synod. I've mentioned that before for people who will challenge the reality of gangstalking. This, well, I don't know. What do you mean this gangstalk? What is this? All these people are just schizophrenic. Okay, dude, nobody's doing anything. You're reading into stuff. You're just sitting around talking to a bunch of crazy people, man. They need meds. They need counseling. They need us. And I'm like, no, okay, well, okay. And the thing you do when you get confronted with people like that is you give them undeniable evidence, right? But what they do, they'll always minimize it, and they'll try to separate that from what the targeted individuals are talking about. You bring up like MK Ultra or something like that, and it was, well, that's different. That's different, and then it's different than what you're talking about. And well, no, it's not, because the people that dealt with that MK Ultra were, there were doctors involved in that. There were nurses involved in that. There were police involved in that. We don't even know all the people who were involved in it, and it was a conspiracy, and people were experimented on, and they were tortured, and they were covertly drugged and poisoned, and who knows what happened. I mean, there was all kinds of things. It was basically like the Nazi experiments, and probably worse, involving children and everything, right? Or you'll talk about the Lutheran Synod, and that's basically the same thing, right? And they had what they called the machine, and it was a way to, rather than to confront someone who had, gotten into the group or had basically risen up in power in the church, is, rather than to try and get them, I don't know, fired or whatever, they would just literally use that type of gang-stalking methodology. And, it was horrifying for people who were threatened with it, because it's the same thing targeted individuals deal with. And they would go into their office install cameras. They would bug their phones. They would do all kinds of little things. They would sabotage electronic equipment. They would dig up dirt on the individual. They would use directed conversations. They would use workplace harassment. They would do all that stuff. They would use all kinds of psychological games. They would break into their house. All of that stuff. Same thing. Okay. And what was the similar theme around all this? There's plausible deniability. It's your word against everybody else's, right? You're somebody who checked into a drug rehab facility during the MK Ultra program, and you swear these people are doing this stuff. Oh, come on, this guy's going through withdrawals. He's out of his mind. He's in a drug-induced psychosis. What do you mean we're experimenting on you? What do you mean we're doing all these things to you? This guy's lost his mind, right? He's just crazy. Plausible deniability. What do you mean all these people are doing these things to you? We're a church community, right? You saying people broke into your office? Why they're saying what to you? Why would someone say that to you? That's crazy. All right, you're starting to lose it, man. That's what's going on, and it's designed that way. And there's really no way of getting out of that. The only strategy that the targeted individual can employ is to pretend as if everything is okay, to try to minimize and cancel out and neutralize the effect of the manipulation involved in their harassment. If you react to it, if you acknowledge it, well, that works for the perps. And I've mentioned before that the last thing you want to do is confront one of these people, right? You don't want to smile and let them know that you know. That might seem okay, but you're being fooled by that. They wanted you to see it, duh. That's the whole point, right? They want you to know that you're being hunted down. I've also mentioned before that there's probably a lot of people out there who are being harassed and targeted. They're targeted individuals, but they're not getting the overt harassment. They're people who literally believe they're slipping into mental illness. I've met people like that before. They're wondering, what's wrong with their life. They don't know. They might they might get hit with some V2K here or there. I'm hearing voices. Or it might be something demonic. I'm starting to sound like one of those schizophrenics. All of a sudden, I'm just moody. I don't know why. I can't relax. I'm getting frustrated. And then, the people, rather than to, come out and use the directed conversations with obvious stuff, they're going to be doing subtle techniques around them. And what's wrong with you? Maybe you need to see a shrink. And those people don't even know that they're victims of gang stalking because, it really is that scientific. Some of the perps are invisible. I've talked about the demonic stuff or even the technology. It's all connected. And you don't know what's going on. Different frequencies, all kinds of things can be used to change the mood of a victim. Who knows exactly how the spiritual entities involved in that stuff are working, but they can do that. They can throw thoughts in your mind. People will talk about intrusive thoughts. They will talk about different things involving what they perceive to be witchcraft or poltergeist activity. And you just have all that stuff. In fact, there's a lot of symptoms that targeted individuals talk about. And, just that makes people look crazy, right? The environmental tyranny that is around them. And they can start, having all kinds of different, symptoms like, they'll feel lightheaded, right? They'll just feel faint. Maybe they'll start having heart palpitations. A lot of people will talk about the electronic weapons that are used against targeted individuals. And some of them can be, I guess, hypothetically used to kill people. They will feel as if they're, suddenly very anxious or uneasy for no reason, right? And you don't know whether you're dealing with something that's demonic or some type of government thing. You might have numbness. You might have tingling in your body. And the other thing that targets are faced with is they might have a legitimate health problem, But after being harassed and stalked, the first thing that's going to pop into your head is it's some kind of gang stalking thing. It might be a health problem. And, the fact that the target is already paranoid, well, that makes it more complex for them to just deal with regular things and assess the situation properly. Some targets will talk about tinnitus. That's a very common symptom of gang stalking, and what a lot of people would consider electronic harassment. I've seen that stuff with the demonic as well, which of course is probably technological too. Really ridiculously loud tinnitus. I mean, it's annoying. Or you might even have this sensation like one of your ears is being plugged, or both of them is being plugged. Kind of similar to when you're swimming or something like that, and you get water in your ear, and then you get out of the water and you get away from it, and the water comes out. It's like you can hear everything. I've had that happen. A lot of targets will talk about paresthesia. They might have different sensations on their skin, or sleep paralysis, which that's demonic stuff there. I've had that happen where targets will feel paralyzed, and they'll be awake, but they won't be able to move. And it might happen suddenly. You might be in a dead sleep, and suddenly you will wake up, or you'll wake up in the morning. That's the first time it ever happened to me. I woke up in the morning, and then I was just laying there, and all of a sudden I realized I couldn't move. But my eyes were open, and then I started hearing this growling, and I could feel something. It was just horrifying, And if you're ever, by the way, if you're ever in that type of situation, you definitely want to cry out to the Lord Jesus Christ. That's one of the things that when you deal with different things that targets deal with, which all this stuff really calls for the same solution, that you have relief. And because that happened to me a couple times, and every time I asked God to help me, and I basically cried out to the Lord, and it would stop. And if you do that consistently, they'll back off, because they know what's going to happen. They know what you're going to do. They might try to get the target into a place where they doubt their salvation, or doubt their relationship with God, and try to maneuver around that stuff. I think a firefighter talked about that in one of the live streams. Is one of the strategies of these gang stalkers. You can see the spiritual corruption is to get you into sin, or get you into a place of unbelief, or distract you, or to try and manipulate you. A lot of targets will talk about the sensation of electricity, some even feeling a type of magnetic field moving up and down their body, maybe their hair standing up or something like that. Similar to what you would experience maybe during an x-ray, the different sensations that would involve difficulty controlling your body temperature. You might feel like you're heating up. I've had that happen before, and it's just, you don't know what's going on. It's like very sudden, or it's the opposite. You'll feel cold. Maybe the room temperature will change suddenly. And I've heard, a lot of targets talk about all of a sudden it'll just feel like somebody hit them with a heat lamp, and you don't know what's going on. And that it's usually not isolated to that. There'll be other things that go along with it. You might experience sudden memory problems, or even trouble communicating. That was funny. Some even talk about paralysis, confusion, panic, the sensation of burning on their skin with hot flashes. Maybe they're being hit by a steam can, and I've had that one happen to me, cold flashes, or you get this weird sinking feeling along with all that. And then the tinnitus I already mentioned, but sometimes it'll be a little more specific, where the target will hear different bell tones, right? And it's not the same. Tinnitus is a real high pitched ring. Sometimes it'll actually involve lower bell tone pitches. Of course, hearing voices is one of the symptoms that a lot of targets will deal with, along with different things involving the Havana syndrome, like symptomatology. And then, of course, the intrusive thoughts, which when you combine all these things together, and I've talked about that before, you can't really isolate any of this stuff. When you're looking at the target being boxed in, surrounded by the plausible deniability, dealing with the sensitization and the triggering and all that stuff, you start questioning everything. And the fact that you are being deprived of regular stimuli gets you in your head too much to the point where I've used the example of Denzel Washington in the movie Hurricane, where he refused to comply and they threw him down in solitary, right? And so he's down there, and basically he's experiencing what all targets deal with, basic deprivation, sensory deprivation. Is similar to what they did in MK Ultra, which I guess was one of the most horrifying things that they could do. Your brain needs input, right? And you're going to try and make up for that. You're in a dark room by yourself, or you're experiencing the isolation that targets deal with, and you're going to inevitably start talking to yourself. Along with this process of breaking someone down to the point where they disassociate with that isolation. That's a reciprocity that is undeniable. That's a recipe for a type of scrupulosity, right? And I've mentioned before that the tyranny that is around targets with all these little games that they're playing. Like I said, eventually you're going to read into something, or eventually this stuff is going to start to put you in a spiral. And the whole idea is to get you to be your own handler. The whole idea is to infuse and interject these things into the mind of the victim, even if they can't get you to believe that you're just hallucinating all this stuff. They still, with the process of psychic driving or repetition, will use these techniques as a type of injection into your mind and in your life, and it's going to have that effect, right? You're eventually going to become critical of yourself because you think other people are watching you, right? One of the most relaxing, I don't know, I guess, aspects of going out into the country, or just getting away from everyone and collecting your thoughts, is the fact that you just have that quiet time and have that intimate privacy that everybody needs. Targets are deprived of that because all the things that are happening to targets leads them into place where they perceive that they are being watched 24 hours a day and by multiple people constantly, or that they're even on some type of Truman Show. And so they become very critical, right? And a lot of the techniques that are used against target individuals are there to embarrass and degrade them, right? So the personal information involved in the directed conversations might involve something that would shame them. Maybe something that they were doing with their partner, maybe a sexual act, maybe it's a scar that they have or something. And, how do they know that I have that scar or something? That they're obviously looking at me while I'm naked, or things that are going on in private areas in their dwelling or whatever. And I've talked about that. What's the insinuation to the target that they're watching them in the bathroom or taking a shower or whatever, or sleeping or having sex with their partner or whatever is going on. And that's used in a way to degrade and shame them and to trigger them into that type of behaviors where they're going to think they're being watched all the time. I've used that example of Myron May, where I think he was in his bathroom and he kept getting something, whether it was demonic or V2K. I'll let you decide what that was. But the thing that he was hearing was he never uses lotion, right? And so all that stuff, it's going to give the target the idea these people are always watching. You can't even get into your bathroom and get out of the bathtub without being scrutinized by somebody, whatever the case is, whether you're doing something like that or whatever. And so the whole idea for him was that he was always being watched. Why do they care if I'm not using lotion or whatever the target is dealing with, right? One of the things that I dealt with, and I've talked about this one before, was they started playing a little game with me when I would lay down and go to sleep. Was when I was living out at the trailer. If you guys haven't watched my videos, you can go back to the Gangstalking crime scene evidence, first video I have up there. And I was attacked out there, just in ways that were beyond, okay? But one of the things they did, I would lay down, the lights would be off and everything, and I was living at the far end of the trailer. And it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath mobile home. And all of a sudden, this kept happening too. Every time I would lay down, all of a sudden I would hear a very, it was like it was off in the distance, and it was like a subwoofer, somebody with one of those real high-powered, stereo systems in their vehicle, right? And the volume would increase. It sounded like somebody was driving down the street and then parking in the driveway, right at the other end of the trailer. But you get some subwoofers going, and that stuff it'll shake your trailer. And that would happen every time I would lay down, and you could hear it coming. And I'm thinking, God, who is that? And of course, it would just get so loud, it would be vibrating, and it sounded like the windows were going to break. So I'd get up out of bed, and I'd get out, open the door, and I'd start walking down the hallway towards the kitchen, go to the other side of the trailer to look to see who's there. It's a retirement village. That kind of stuff is against the rules. And I was dealing with a bunch of weird stuff that was going on with the landlord and everything else, where they're calling the cops out there and saying that I'm selling drugs and shooting guns. And now I got this. But every time I would get to that place where I was walking towards the kitchen, it would start to fade out. It sounded like they're driving out of the driveway, right? That they're leaving. And so, after the third or fourth time that happens, I'm thinking, how do they? Because a lot of, I've after a couple times, I'm like, they'll have to just leave. I'm not gonna, because a lot of the noise campaigns and games that you play with the Gangstalkers, if you go window geeking or run outside, with a bat or something, they love it. They love that kind of stuff because now they're winning. They're getting you all freaked out or whatever. And if you just ignore a lot of the stuff, they're not getting the payoff. But every time, I would try that, it would stop until I would get up and start walking down the hallway, and then it would just fade out. I'm thinking, how do they know? How do they know when to drive away? Of course, what's the insinuation? They got a damn camera in here or something, right? The windows were covered, right? Eventually, I got to the point where I didn't even turn the light on. This happened for quite a while. Okay. And I was like, gosh, that's basically proof that there's only, how would they know? I'm going to get a camera and put it up in the window. Right. So I did. I hooked it up to my VCR, and this was back when I was still pretty debilitated, going through withdrawals. So it even made it worse. And it was like clockwork, where I would only be able to sleep just for a little while when I took the meds, because I was, basically desperately hooked on benzodiazepines. And so they really had a lot of fun with me. But I'm thinking, well, I'm going to get the camera, and I'll put it in the window, and I'm going to see who this is. What's up? And of course it happened again. And I got the camera, and I'm thinking, good, I'm going to find out who this is, damn it. And so I get up, and like clockwork, the music starts to fade away. So I go and I watch the replay, and there's no one there, right? No one is coming down the street. There's no one in the driveway. And I'm thinking, they got a damn speaker onto the trailer now, a subwoofer, right? I mean, we're talking loud. I mean, rattling the windows. And I'm yelling. No one's around. It's the middle of the night, and I'm yelling, I'll tear this place apart, and I'll find it. Never happened again. Never happened again. But all kinds of little games like that. Or I would go to sleep, and they would, have somebody under the trailer, and bam, they would hit the bottom of the floor, And, but the point is, obviously, in order to play those games, right, somebody has got to know what's going on. Somebody has to be aware of what you're doing. And there's only so many ways that can happen. And the target will get into that place where, they'll feel like people are watching them all the time, and they will start to get into self-scrutiny. And like I said, they want you to be your own worst enemy. They want you to internalize and amalgamate all this stuff in with you and how you see yourself. And they want you to be your own handler, right? And you'll get into scrupulosity, or you'll get into negative talk with yourself, or having negative thoughts about yourself and they'll infuse all that stuff in with you. And if you forget how you got the way you are, if you start to make mistakes as a targeted individual and you're dealing with the reciprocity of harassment and all these things that are coming against you that make you dysfunctional, that make you paranoid, that make it hard for you to think and live, then they'll get you. They will get you to believe the lie. They will get you to turn in to your own enemy, and they love that. Right? The plausible deniability is cloaking all the activity involved in gang stalking. There's all kinds of other symptoms that targets talk about. You know, when you get into the covert drugging and poisoning, and I mean, you got all kinds of weird stuff. I've mentioned that before. That you get into some pretty intricate, different and plots and gaslighting campaigns when it comes to that. I've talked about the synergistic poisoning plots. I've used the example of using someone's habitual lifestyle against them. You don't have to put, cyanide or LSD or something like that in someone's food or whatever, just in case the target actually gets someone to believe them and they test. Even though I've heard of a lot of targets talking about MDMA showing up on the drug test, I've seen that before. There's a lot of weird explanations for that. But when you get into using these synergistic plots against targets, I've mentioned before, if you don't know what that is, that's using multiple chemicals together to get a reaction, right? So in other words, you could put one chemical in a hygiene product, another chemical, you could fume the target or get them like that, or you could put something in the food or whatever, or you could just use something in conjunction with their habitual lifestyle. If they smoke, okay, so how many chemicals are produced when you smoke a cigarette? A lot of chemicals. What about different energy drinks or high levels of potassium or whatever, or that they drink alcohol or whatever, okay, or they're putting on a specific type of lotion or something. And what will happen is those chemicals will come together and they will create a type of reaction. A lot of different possibilities there. The benefit to doing something like that is that you can't figure out what it is. If you just went to the hospital or you called the cops or something, which, like I said earlier, that that'll play against you, even if you can prove it, because you're talking about something that people don't believe could be possible. But even if you did, you'd be in trouble there. But what's going to happen when they look? Even if they do at all, because there's a lot of people out there that have been attacked by their spouse or significant other with obvious chemicals, and doctors are afraid to say anything. It just depends on what state you're in. And a lot of times prosecutors are afraid to go after somebody, and they will use ridiculous plausible deniability in the sense that maybe somebody had mental illness 10 years before that. And, the whole defense of, well, maybe they just decided to kill themselves with some ethylene glycol and some lime jello, right? But when you get into the synergistic stuff, they're not going to find it. They're not going to be able to figure it out. When you use a spectromatograph test, you almost got to know what you're looking for, right? Even if it's heavy metal poisoning or something. So what happens? Well, it's a good way to gaslight the target, and it's a good way to create the plausible deniability around that and hide and obfuscate what's really happening, right? And I've talked about the example with cigarettes. That's a really good one. I've seen that one before, and I've got the conversations that come out of that. I remember one time I was because I knew about that, and all of a sudden I started experiencing I would smoke a cigarette and my heart would just start pounding. And, I used to drink a lot of Powerade. I was over at this guy's house one night, and, I had committed to quitting smoking, right? And, I was at the point where I was going to lose it. It's not easy to do that. And this guy, I had some suspicions about him before, but I was like, gosh, I can't take it. I'm going to have a cigarette. And he looked over at me and he goes, yeah, he goes, that's a pretty good drink you got there too. And he goes, enjoy that cigarette. And I lit it up and my heart was pounding. And there was some other comments that went along with it. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm seeing what's going on here. There's some kind of chemical that I'm getting that they got me with or whatever, and it's probably reacting either with the cigarettes. And I noticed that if I wouldn't drink the Powerade, that I wouldn't get that. I'm like, man, this whole thing is just weird. But you can deal with that stuff, or they will come in and tamper with something or whatever to get the target to try to call the police or whatever and say, what's like your cigarette pack. I've heard a lot of targets talk about that. All of a sudden, you leave it out, even if it's not opened up, it's messed with a little bit. Looks like somebody got into it or something. And then, of course, when you smoke one, you'll get that synergistic reaction, and you'll assume that somebody poisoned the cigarettes. If you call the cops or take it to the hospital or something, they're not going to find anything because it's a reaction, right? It's a synergistic plot. You might even run into people who are, trying to gaslight the target and invite them over for dinner or take them out to eat or something. And what's going to happen? Well, they can eat the food and it's not going to bother them, right? And the scary part is I ran across this whole idea of synergistic poisoning in a book that looked like a medical book, like a Dick and Jane old medical book, and it had all kinds of weird stuff in it. It was like along with all my family's medical books and stuff like that, and I assumed that's what it was, and I used that. That was back before we had the internet and all that stuff really up and running, and we still use stuff like that. We still had books and all those things, encyclopedias and everything. We didn't have all the stuff that everybody's using now. You just Google it or whatever. And I'm looking through this book, and one of the first things that I noticed was a way to get someone committed against their will, right? And it had to do with elderly people. And I'm thinking, what the hell is this? And the whole idea to justify this methodology, like I said, there is a methodology involved in this type of stuff. And it involves that plausible deniability. And it was an elderly person who had, basically gone beyond their years. And it was just too much of a drain on the family. And it was a way to get them to basically be committed against their own will to an elderly facility, right? And the instructions were to do all these little games. It's basically the same thing that targets deal with, the directed conversations, even to the point where they would steal their money or move things around in their room, and then they would all collude together and play little games, like when the individual was invited for dinner, they would all be talking loudly, and then as soon as that person would come in, they would all stop and look at each other funny. What's the suggestion that they're talking about you, right? Any rational person would come to that conclusion. You start experiencing that, or people start acting weird around you. Well, what's going to happen? You're going to think something's going on. The other game was that, along with stealing their money and moving things around and then denying it, was to get them in a place where they were, with directed conversation, everything, to believe that they were, there was a poisoning plot or a plot to kill them or something, right? And then they would make like a cake or some cookies or pie, something that could be, set out for a while. And then after the individual was sensitized and was wondering what the hell's going on, and all these people around them were just acting weird all of a sudden, they would all offer these things to I can't wait to have some cake and some cookies, Grandma. Boy, you better have some, num num num. And then nobody would eat it, and they would act really strange and keep offering it to the elderly person, right? And of course, what's the idea, along with all the directed conversations, is that they're going to start wondering, I wonder if these people are trying to poison me. They're talking about all this. They want to, eat the cookies and stuff. Come on, it's going to be good. And they don't eat it. And so, when the elderly person finally tries to confront these people, right, there's all that plausible deniability around it. Of course, well, we think old grandpa is starting to lose it. Time to take him to Aspen Meadows or whatever. And they can just have them committed. They start talking to a doctor and saying, well, these people are trying to poison me, or they're trying to kill me, or they're stealing my money. And of course, no one's going to admit what's going on, right? there's a lot of documentation out there about this, whether it's the Lutheran Synod or weird stuff like that, or you get into MK Ultra or other things. But one of the things that you're always going to run into is that activity is obfuscated. I'm going to get into the comments and see who's out there. Welcome to the live stream, Nicholas Boserman, Mrs. Matson Miles. Welcome to the live stream. Multi-Dimension High, welcome. Steve the Pigeon, good to see you in here. And what else is going on here? Let's see who else is out there. Let's see. I'm going to skim through here. Angels are real. Welcome to the live stream. Firefighter, always good to have you here. FNE, this is war. Yes, it is. Welcome to the live stream. The Man. And he said the definition of the word loser is gangstalkers. Yeah, they've got that on Wikipedia, I think, don't they? Yeah. Let me see here. Tasha Teeling, welcome to the live stream. And what else do we got in here? Let's see. Okay. I think we've got everybody so far. I don't think I missed anyone. Jake Nord, welcome to the live stream. Okay. So I'm going to go through some of these and see what you guys are talking about here. Okay. All righty. Let's see here. Okay. And Steve the Pigeon says, it seems like to me, the more you try and seek help, the worse it gets, which adds to all of it. It does. It's designed that way. That's the whole point of the plausible deniability. You start talking about this stuff, like I mentioned earlier when I was ranting about all the conclusions that any rational person would come up with when they start experiencing this activity from all these different directions in multiple geographical locations, is that it just doesn't sound realistic, and that's the worst part about it, because you are dealing with something that is hidden, and it involves a type of infrastructure that's already there. I've mentioned that before, that you are dealing with a theme-based mechanism that was already there. You didn't know it was there. You had no idea it was there. And the target gets the reality flipped. And then they start looking at all this and they process it personally. Oh my gosh, how much money are they spending to do all these things? And of course, it doesn't sound realistic. The person tries to explain this to someone, and it's so labyrinthian and convoluted that it just makes them look like a nut, a fruitcake, right? What do you mean there are these people from a secret society, or how much the government is chasing you around to freak you out as you're trying to buy some chocolate chip mint ice cream over at the grocery store? What are you talking about, man? And they're doing what to you at work? Why? And it's the Freemasons. Who are these people in there? How much are they did what? They followed you, 300 miles when they knew you were going to be at the hotel. What do you mean? How much? They had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this stuff. And of course it's already there. They don't have to do it, right? Sometimes targets do get followed around and deal with surveillance, deal with stuff like that, and smear campaigns and little things that are going on, and that can happen, but it doesn't have to. Right? That's one of the biggest hindrances for a lot of targets out there. They do not see the framework that they're dealing with. They do not see how this stuff works and how the infrastructure is already there and how people can be manipulated. And some of this stuff is literally planned out and set up in advance by the kingdom of darkness. And I've mentioned that stuff many, 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 many times. When you get into the occult, when you get into the New Age, when you get into astrology, when you get into the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, when you get into witchcraft, when you get into the secret societies, the Illuminati, all that stuff, it's all the same. They have the hidden knowledge and the secret wisdom. It's like the tarot cards. How do they know what's going to happen? How do they know these things? How do they know that, it must be my dead grandma that we're talking to, because she's the only one that knew that I accidentally dropped my cupcake on a grasshopper at the park when I was 4. It has to be grandma. Nope, it's not her. It's a familiar spirit, and they play their game well. Okay, and a lot of people are being manipulated by demons. A lot of people are under the tyranny of the world, the flesh, and the devil, and they've got a plan. Okay, and when the target's reality is flipped and they're dealing with all this stuff, and they have the menagerie of the puppets, the technology, the people who are influenced, the social dynamics, the structure that is around them, the fact that they are processing information in a personal way, and they believe the people on the newscast are looking through the TV at them as they are watching this, that they're on the Truman Show, that they're in a different dimension, that they're in the Twilight Zone, that they're in purgatory, that they've died and gone to hell, and now the whole thing just, it doesn't make sense to people that are out there, and there's no other explanation. If you don't cancel this stuff out by processing the information properly, realizing what you're up against, canceling out some of the syllogistic conclusions that they're trying to get you to come to as a target, like the government is following you all over the United States to freak you out every time you go, buy a pack of pistachios at the store. It's not gonna work out. People are gonna think you're fruitcake, man. They're gonna think you're crazy. They think I'm nuts. But you know what? I don't care, and I've talked about that before too. That you got to be willing to just put all that aside. And if people want to think you're crazy, that's fine, because part of the environmental tyranny that you're dealing, it's not that you should just go out and advertise it like some people do. I wouldn't wear around a targeted individual T-shirt or something. You can if you want. I mean, that's up to you. It's your world, man. It's your program. But what's going to happen? Well, people, if they know anything about gangstalking, they'll be tempted to play a game with you, right? And you won't know. I've had things happen to me where I was sure, I was absolutely 100% positive that it was gangstalking, and I looked back on my security system. The wind blew some siding off my house one time, right? Or somebody starts banging on my windows at like 2:30 in the morning, and then come to find out this drunk lady's walking down the street banging on everybody's windows as she goes home. Who knows? Maybe she got in a fight with her boyfriend. I don't know, but it had nothing to do with gangstalking. But if I wouldn't have had my camera, I would have bet every penny that I had that that's what happened. The sons of bitches did it again. The bastards. One time, there was a squirrel jumping around on my roof, and I thought for sure somebody was throwing something on my house. Right? And that's how it's designed. Okay. It's got to be, the Stasi police force, man. That person in the fire truck, with one headlight was looking at me funny. They're following me around in fire trucks. No, they're not. Come on, man. Snap out of it. Right? It's designed to get you freaked out like that, man. They're setting up accident scenes for me. No, they're not, man. Not happening. Not happening, but it doesn't have to, because the world is basically one big setup already. And that's what people don't realize. That's the problem that targeted individuals are going to run into. Rather than to process this stuff as the tyranny of the world you're already in, and you just didn't know about it before, they're going to start looking at this stuff like everybody's just chasing them down in real time, and all this stuff is, they're going to take it even more personal. Can't let it happen. Okay, now we're going here. Okay. All right, I'm just scanning through the comments here. I don't know what we're talking about in here, but I'm definitely not going to post it. Hold on, I'm getting a kitty attack. What are you doing out there, turkey butt? Lay down. She was going after something. Maybe there was a little mouse running around out there. Sorry, guys. All kinds of little distractions all of a sudden. Okay, looks like we have some real unedifying conversations out there. I'll give you guys one warning. Let's try and clean it up, or I'll put you in timeout myself. I ain't got no problem with that. It'll be funny until that happens. Okay, and we got Andy Smith. Welcome to the live stream. Okay, let's see what's going on here. And Steve the Pigeon says there's a lot of times where things are probably deliberate, but I've written it off as coincidence for your own. So that's what you got to do. That's a good point, Steve. That's great advice. Because that's what should be happening anyway. You want to get to that point. If you're to that point, Steve, you're already, at the top, buddy. You're there, man. If that's what you want, if you're to the point where you're not even noticing this stuff anymore, you're light years ahead of the gang stalkers. And I've talked about that. One of the worst things about being a new targeted individual is you're just noticing all this stuff. And it is like, it's the first thing when you wake up in the morning, you're worried about you're trying to figure out what's going on. You're walking through the store and you're in shock. What the hell is this stuff? It's the shock and awe of that type of bombardment, gang stalking methodology where the target is just, infiltrated with that trauma-based mind control, man. And you're looking for it. You're looking everywhere. You're listening to conversations. You've been shamed. People are using little, bits of information, or they come up to you and have a conversation with you, and then you realize it's got a double meaning. You're dealing with a little innuendo, and they baited you into this conversation. And, about halfway through the convo, they bring up something that's just going to embarrass you or whatever. But you're not going to let that happen again, are you? Because you're smart. And so now you're trying to figure out what everybody is saying when they're not saying it. And you realize that your ability to communicate is starting to degrade. And that's what they want. They want you focused. They want you looking for these things. They want you reading into conversations and becoming exhausted trying to figure out all these little mind game techniques, when really it's like Steve the Pigeon said, you get to the point where you didn't even notice it. You don't care. If somebody uses an innuendo or something, you just, you get to the point after a while, you see what these people are about. You consider the source of your harassment. You know what's happening. You know they're needy. You know they're not all that. At first, it scared you. At first, they looked special. At first, you thought maybe there was something that you needed to figure out because you were just left on the outside looking in, right? And you didn't know what was going on, but they're not. And you see that. You see that they're wrong. You see that they're fickle, right? And they try to stomp around the target at first and scare them and get them into that mode where they're trying to play the game. And it's just a way to incorporate your ego into it and get you into that place of emotional manipulation. And once you get to the place where you see all that, you just you care less. You don't even need to worry about it. I'm to the place now where you got to come up and yell at me or something. I'm not listening to what people are talking about. I could have somebody doing a directed conversation right around. I wouldn't even notice it. I don't even care. It doesn't even work anymore. They don't even try it on me anymore because it doesn't matter, And if it's so obvious that I notice it, it's just a confirmation, for those times where you feel like you're losing your mind and reading into stuff. Well, I remember that. I've mentioned that before. When you get obvious harassment, put a mental note, because, this stuff does get pretty labyrinthian. But if you're to the point where you're not even recognizing it, you're there, man. You win. That's what you want. You want to be able to walk through, I just about swore. You want to be able to walk through a storm of this and not even notice it. And if you get to the other side and then you're just like, you know what? Those people were harassing me and I didn't even notice it. You've won. You've entered in to the ultimate transcendent level of targeted individual almighty at that point. Okay? Because they can't touch you then. If you get to the point where you don't even care. You're not listening to conversations. You don't need headphones anymore. You're not looking around at this stuff. You have literally no shame. You're not worried about what anybody else thinks. And, you know what's going on. Nobody's messing with you at that point. They got to come up and use primitive techniques, stalling tactics. They got to get in front. They got to attack your personal property or whatever. That's the only way they can even bother you anymore. You're there, man. That's a good one, Steve. I'm glad to hear it. Keep doing that, man. Okay. All right. I'm looking at Andy Smith's question here. I'm seeing what's up with this. Andy Smith says, what do you think about Doc? Look at their brain mapping our brains, and they're using trauma so that they can upload it through their supercomputers with a 24-hour period. They cause trauma. Well, I don't know. I mean, I know the government's working on a lot of stuff. And a lot of the, when I looked into some of the things that are out there, whether it's the hydrodyning or the neural monitoring or whatever, it just, some of that stuff cancels itself out. And when you run into that type of scenario where the, supposed projected ability of a speculative type of technology or situation is so, I don't know, superior that it transcends the purpose of what they would be doing, that you got a huge issue. In other words, if they could do all the stuff that people say they can with these supercomputers and everything, why is all this other stupid stuff going on that's out there in society? If they really had the ability to control all these people with a supercomputer and control your mind that intricately with it, would they really be bothering with this gangstalking BS? They wouldn't. They wouldn't have to. They would, if they really had the capability to have that much control over the population and people to the point where targeted individuals or their brains are literally getting controlled like that, and the people around them are all being controlled by some type of cryogenic supercomputer in an underground city from Colorado, would they even be playing around with this other stuff? Right? I don't think so. So you got a bit of a problem there. Does that mean they're not working on that? No, they're working. I guarantee they're trying to do that stuff. I know that they're trying to do that. And there's lots of different ways that they've tried to map, all those things. Whether it's, radio waves, or whether they use, infrared light or other different things that I've looked at. It's pretty creepy how they can do it. They can kind of decipher some of those things, but I don't know if I would go that far with it. I really don't. And I think that you have to be realistic, and that there are a lot of things that are still a mystery to the scientific community out there. Okay. There really is. And some of the stuff that goes into all the theories around that stuff, where, stealing people's souls and downloading their consciousness and everything, there isn't really any proof that they can do that. They're probably trying to, but I don't believe it. I don't think that they're there yet. I think you have to be very careful on how you process that. And remember that, God is in control, and, ultimately the solution is to draw near to him. And, as far as someone's soul being stolen or whatever, no. And the Bible's very clear. They're after your soul. They want you to go to hell. They want you to be confused. And the kingdom of darkness wants to do that, but they're not doing it like that. Okay. They want you to believe, something false. They want you to move away from the gospel of Christ. They want you to deny those things, or to believe something else or whatever. But, really the thing that the Bible emphasizes is that, like I said, it goes against that criteria of faith and how you feel about God and your relationship with Christ. And it says very explicitly, do not fear the one who can kill the body and do no more, but the one who can throw your soul into hell afterwards, which is God, right? You fear God. Okay. And I don't know. I like I said, I'm not against that type of people looking into that stuff. But as far as some of the stuff that's out there, I would have to respectfully disagree with a lot of it. Okay, and like I've been talking about in my videos, I try to be consistent. There is a dispensation of technology from the spiritual dimension, and we can see that all the way back in history. Okay, and just because we're talking about something demonic doesn't mean we're excluding technology, because that's where it comes from. Okay. Can they do that stuff? There's probably, a lot of stuff out there that they can do. But you still are not throwing, the baby out with the bathwater. You still have, obvious examples in the scriptures of people being demon possessed. You have the obvious, examples of disembodied spirits who are literally, hunting people down so that they can inhabit them. Okay. You got a lot of stuff like that going on. To think that all this stuff is just some kind of supercomputer, I don't buy into it. So I don't believe that's happening to targets as much as they believe it. And I know it makes people feel uncomfortable to think that they're dealing with demonic entities. And a lot of people don't like the idea of God's righteous judgment and sin, and the fact that they've got to submit to God. And the hell is very abrasive, and the kingdom of darkness will use that, and they will obfuscate the fact that God is he is offering everyone mercy, right? And if you submit to God, you don't have to worry about wrath, right? But the devil makes that very difficult to do, and a lot of people have habits. They have a lot of things that they feel guilty about. The kingdom of darkness is very good at what they do, and they will try to create an aversion where people will move away from that. Or a lot of people will deal with the stalking in church, or they'll deal with a corrupt minister or something like that. And I've talked about that before, that you're going to deal with that stuff. It's like the Lutheran Synod, there's gang stalking in church, right? And you can see the corrupt doctrines and stuff out there. And so a lot of people will have really bad experiences with that. And they just have a complete aversion to it, or it just doesn't make sense to them, because if that's what's going on, why is God allowing it? And then it'll just bother them. And so I don't know. I lean more towards the spiritual aspect of this, especially when you're dealing with targets who are talking about stuff that is just logistically beyond human organization. Okay, it's important to look at it that way, and that's just my opinion. Okay. Okay. I'm just looking through the comments here. All right. Looks like you guys are having a conversation about some things. I don't know whether I should comment on that or not. Unite 101 says, don't even take it to law enforcement. Just make this documentary in regards to your experiences. Yeah, a lot of people will document what's going on. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's good later when you, like I said, deal with the heavy gaslighting and that switch that happens. All targets deal with that, where they'll get real subtle, and they will use real covert methods, and just really nip and bite at you from a distance, while you're dealing with other things. And usually that works a lot better after the target has been sensitized and they're dealing with not only extreme paranoia, but irrational paranoia. And I'm not trying to insult anybody, because I think anybody who's been targeted for a long time has that irrational paranoia, right? But is it really paranoia? Well, not if you're a targeted individual. But what I mean by that is that, you've been attacked, in so many different ways, and the labyrinth of your harassment involves that higher form of gang stalking. Is that nothing is really off limits. I mean, I've seen some pretty weird stuff where you got a room that's locked from the inside, the windows are barred and everything, and somehow something will happen in that room, and the only thing you can come up with is that there's some kind of demonic thing going on. A lot of people will say, well, they've actually got technology that can literally move stuff around. I don't know, maybe they do, but I mean, I've seen weird stuff like that. I mean, you want to talk about some paranoia, and it's just a lot of the stuff that happens. There's just no possible way. Or when targets deal with that clairvoyant activity, or somebody seems to be reading their mind, or they know what they're dreaming about, or they give them a bit of information, and 5 years later that whatever it is happens, or 10 years later, or 20 years. I've seen that stuff personally. It's the same thing that I talked about when it comes to that destiny philosophy that is used in the secret societies and the higher up levels of Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. It's the same stuff that bewitches the elite. But how does the target process that information? That's the key. It's like when they start dealing with that scenario where they're having dreams and the dreams come true. You guys ever had that happen? A lot of people have. But then what happens? Then you have this nightmare and you're wondering if that's going to happen. And it's just all these things will incorporate in the target individual psyche and in their landscape, and it's a terror campaign, right? So, how do you process that information? And, how do you know what's really possible and what isn't? When you're dealing with this stuff, I think Nicholas Boserman asked me about holograms the other night. I've heard a lot of targets talk about that. There is a lot of weird stuff. There's things involved in Project Bluebeam that are freaky. There's things involved in the spiritual dimension where people see things or interact with things. I've had weird stuff like that happen too. And it's like, I don't know how it works. I don't know how that stuff happens. But the fact that targets are being hunted down and they're being harassed, it's enough to make you irrationally, worry about things that other people wouldn't seem. They would look at that and be like, that's way too far. Okay, you've gone way too far. It really looks crazy to them, but they just haven't been subjected to it. And I've mentioned that before. The gap between people who experience the stuff that you guys experience, it's just like, before you were getting targeted. If you're one of those target individuals who's, had that reality flip, I wouldn't believe it. I know, I've experienced some weird stuff, but even after dealing with the weird stuff that I dealt with as a kid or whatever, if you'd asked me, if this was possible or whatever, before all this stuff happened to me, I would think it was some kind of mental illness or something. I wouldn't think it was possible. I remember listening to people's stories and they would tell me things were happening. I thought they were just trying to drive me crazy. I didn't know that kind of stuff could happen. I mean, I remember listening to stories about people talking about, something that would disappear in their house and they couldn't find it. And then they would find it later in this, right in the same spot. And I'm thinking, this person is just like sucking the life out of me with these nonsensical, ridiculous, irrational stories. Why are they making me listen to this stuff? But they weren't lying. They were telling the truth. How all that stuff works, I don't know. But it happens. I've seen it. I've talked about that stuff before. But when you move into that area, that's, if you don't have the spiritual application of this whole thing, well, I don't know. And then you got to remember that other people, they don't know. They're not going to believe it. And even if they did know, they're not going to want to deal with it. And they're going to try and discredit you, if nothing else, so they can preserve their sanity. right? There's nothing they can really do for you anyway. Okay. Angels Are Real says they can move heavy items, but I watched it move things that weigh less, or excuse me, I watched it move things that weigh less than a half a pound. Your home desk is a target for that. Okay. I don't know. I've heard of that kind of thing. And I know that the spiritual entities can do that stuff. You just never know what you're dealing with. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm just scanning through the comments here. Something here by Unite 101. So when it comes to gangstalking, I'd really sue the bunch given the opportunity. But if I were assaulted or whatever, that's where law enforcement comes into place. But even then, that's not the end goal. Okay. Well, I've talked about that before. You get evidence or something like that, and sometimes you can't use it. I've run into that scenario before, and that's really frustrating. That's really, that's crazy when you get into that place where you're so boxed in. There's so much plausible deniability around your scenario, and you don't know who you're dealing with, and this menagerie is like you're afraid to even say anything. Then I didn't think it would be that bad. I thought, if I actually caught people doing the stuff that I caught them doing, that I'd have the whole thing beat. And I was wrong, man. I mean, it was like, geez, this whole thing is just it's set up in such a way that you can't even say nothing, even if you get evidence sometimes. But with all that said, that if you have the opportunity to get compensation, which I put that in my prayers every day, multiple times a day for you guys and myself, that'd be great. Because I care, watching someone pay for doing this stuff to me in the sense that they're going to be tortured or whatever. I'm not saying that I don't want justice to be done. I think these people should be locked up, and part of that is just raw punishment. Okay, forget about the rehabilitation. If you're dealing with criminals that are raised in families where they don't have the proper guidance or whatever, or they're getting into mischief and they're making they're criminals, and they can be helped out, and rehabilitation is really the only way to fix those people. When you get people that are doing something like gang stalking, there's really no excuse for it. It's one thing to be an idiot and be a thief, or just be lazy, or steal stuff or deal drugs, or okay, whatever. But when you're doing this gang stalking, it's like attempted murder, and it's some crimes. In other words, well, there is rehabilitation, and that's part of the system that we have out there that's missing. You just lock somebody in a cell, and you put them with a bunch of other criminals, and they end up getting worse, and that's stupid. But some of the people that are doing the stuff out there, that's really what they get. Nothing more than punishment. Okay, and that's part of the penalty of our system, and that's part of the way God set this up too. But as far as compensation, that as far as I'm concerned, and I've told people before, because I know that some of the people that have been involved in my scenario, I'm like, you help me, I'll help you. Okay, I don't have any hard feelings. You don't think I know? You don't think I know? I know what's going on. And they'll get that real awkward look, right? That's the last time you're probably going to talk to that person. And but I've offered, yeah, you help me out. I don't know how much you got paid. Some people are getting paid. If you think you got money there, help me out. And it just depends on your scenario. But compensation, absolutely. That would be great. Like I said, I pray for that for you guys all the time. That would really make me happy. I mean, I mean, that I would be glad if these people would get brought into the light and get put in jail. Okay, but really, I'm not going to get a whole lot out of that, because it's, the stuff that targets deal with, their time. You're not going to get none of that back, right? Look back at your life. You're one of those targets that's been dealing with this stuff for a long time. Their screams or whatever. It's like when people talk about revenge. Wouldn't you just like to get somebody, that some of these perps and just take them out? No, that's not going to give me anything. I'm not going to get anything out of that. I'd just be wasting more time. Is all I'd be doing. You know, their blood and screams is not going to bring back the stuff that they took from me. It's not. It's just going to take more time away from me. And the beings that are out there, the entities that are controlling these people, and there are puppet masters, and I've talked about that before. Well, that's what they want, and they'll use that to condemn you. It's kill two birds with one stone. They're using them to get to you, and they're using you to condemn them. It's they can't lose. That's their job. And I've talked about that before. The spiritual entities, people look at this like they're just out there running around, and you get all these weird doctrines. So they're going to send the demons back to hell or whatever. That's not how this works. Okay, God knows what He's doing. These entities you're dealing with are professional. Okay, they have a job to do, literally. And they're trying to get legal leeway to get in your life and do things. Okay, just like they are using you as bait to get legal leeway to take the people who are harassing you to eternal damnation. Okay, literally. This isn't, you talk about gangstalking as a game. It's a game, but in a lot of ways it's not a game at all. Okay, they know what they're doing. Okay, and you can't forget that. You got to remember who you're dealing with. It's not just some government thing where you got these idiots who are just playing these games. That's just the surface level. That's what you're looking at. Those are the little flesh puppets that you're dealing with. There's a huge plan behind it, and they're playing for everything. Okay. Now, Nicholas Boserman says a lot of the stalkers are useless idiots who someone told he's a chomo. I don't blame them so much as they're just stupid. Well, I think that's a lot of times that's an excuse, but that is true that disinformation campaigns will be launched against targeted individuals when they're dealing drugs, or that they're a pedophile or whatever, and it's just a reality. Who really believes what? That's anybody's guess, because a lot of the people you're dealing with, they probably don't even believe that. That's just the bullshit they're throwing at you. But some of them do. I kind of get what Nick is talking about, but at the same time, they don't fact check this stuff, and it's that social dynamic. It's like the experiment they did with people, where they would take someone, who was just a regular, citizen, non-provoked or violent or nothing, none of those things applied. And they would do that experiment where they would make the individual think that they were increasing the electrical voltage every time the person got the question wrong. You guys remember that experiment, right? And they would hear the person screaming in the other room, and they would do it. And they would go all the way up to where they thought they were killing that person. There's no excuse for it. And they don't need to believe that stuff a lot of the time. People are trained. You get into the Tavistock Institute and the groupthink and the cultural Marxism. It's just people are, targeted individuals sometimes are individuals who do not fall into that category of the herd mentality, right? You're not part of that. That could be one of the reasons that you're being targeted. It could be. Okay, that could be part of it. Not always, but sometimes. And when you see, people just going along with this, sometimes that's all they're doing. Some people are doing it out of fear. Some people are just following social dynamics. Some of them, yeah, they're getting paid. Some of them are doing it professionally. Some of them are literally evil. Some of them are taken over by demonic entities. There's a lot of things going on. Some of them are just useless idiots, though. Unite 101 says, after all, you got to remember this is all premeditated, it's organized and planned. Sometimes it is. I mean, ultimately, by the spiritual dimension, it is. When you're dealing with the government stuff, they plan it out. Sometimes they profile people. Yeah, there's a lot of premeditation that goes into it. And when you're doing the logistics, you can't forget that. That's a good point. Okay. Yeah, useful idiots. Yeah, they're making themselves real useful, huh, Nick? Yeah, yeah, we'll play until the end. Like I've said before, as a target individual, you have to remember that the attack is negligible. You're minding your own business. I that's one of the things I usually do eventually. If I get somebody who's really chewing on my ass, I'll remind them of that. I was like, well, yeah, okay, well, welcome to the party. I'm minding my own business, but whatever. I'll deal with you. Okay. All right. Well, guys, I do have to get up and go to work tomorrow. I figured I'd end the live stream about this time, and I appreciate everybody coming on. If you guys have a prayer request, or you have a topic that you want me to do a video on or talk about in a live stream, don't be afraid to put it in the comment section on any video you want to watch. This whole thing that you're dealing with is beyond. And my sympathies go out to everybody that is dealing with harassment. If you're one of those people who just feels like giving up, keep going, draw near to God, ask Him for help. You will experience a time of refreshment wherever you are out there, whether you're running for your life, living in your vehicle, living in some strange hotel somewhere, wondering if you're going to lose your mind. You're taken right to the edge and beyond with gang stalking, and that happens to us all. Maybe you're in that campaign where you are being chased and you're dealing with it all. Maybe you're worried that your health isn't going to recover. Maybe you're wondering if your family's in awe. Maybe you don't think there's a single person out there who would understand, but you're wrong. Targeted individuals, they stick together, and I understand where you are, and I sympathize, and God knows He sees everything. And you want to appeal to that ultimate justice and wisdom of God, and He can work these things out for your benefit. I'd like to thank everybody for participating. I'd like to thank everybody who helped support me in the channel. The link is in the description. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share, because it's been shadow banned. Guys, God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.